Today we're going to drive the Bugatti Chiron for the first time since the accident. You can see the dent here. We think that one got damaged in transit, but we managed to split the car in half, repair the gearbox mounting, put the car back together, start for the first time, and replace all the airbags. It's so smooth. It's scary at the same time. Matt Armstrong just drove the Bugatti Chiron for the first time. Not a factory test driver, not a Bugatti technician, not someone with authorization from the manufacturer who declared this rebuild impossible. Matt Armstrong, first time ever in a car that was in two pieces 14 months ago. And during that drive, no windscreen. A fault code still on the dashboard. Alex nowhere to be seen. Every single system this rebuild had touched was being tested simultaneously. The gearbox mounting bracket Bob welded. The radiators were built from Honda Civic cores. The cooling circuit filled at 3 in the morning. The front crash bar Bob rebuilt in 60 hours without a single measurement from an intact original. All of it tested at once for the first time. By the end of this story, I'm going to tell you what each moment of that drive actually meant technically. What Matt was experiencing when he said the blood was draining from his feet. And the one thing he found after the drive that means this story isn't finished yet. But first, let's talk about the moment before the drive that nobody is discussing. The coolant test. Before Matt could drive, the coolant test had to pass. And it nearly didn't. Bob rebuilt the radiator, pressure tested it, and it passed. He fitted it to the car and vacuum-filled the coolant system at 1:30 in the morning. 39 liters sucked into the circuit by negative pressure. Then coolant appeared on the floor, not from the repaired radiator. From the brackets Bob had just modified. A tiny hole created when Bob moved a fitting 5 millimeters to correct the sizing issue with the new core. The vacuum test hadn't shown it. The pressure test hadn't shown it. Only the actual coolant filling under gravity revealed it. Bob wasn't there. Matt tried to TIG weld it himself. He'd never TIG welded aluminum before. He practiced on scrap metal, said he thought he had it, pressure tested it, and it still leaked. Matt's assessment was simple. Some things are better left to professionals. Bob came back and fixed it in minutes. He pressure tested it again. It was held. Then finally, coolant went in. The engine started. The temperature began to rise. 48 degrees Fahrenheit, slowly climbing. Then 90. Then 94 degrees Celsius. That was the target temperature. Then it continued past. 197. 199. 201. The fans came on. The temperature dropped back down. It stabilized at 92 degrees Celsius. And Matt said, "I think the Honda Civic radiators have worked." Here's what that moment actually meant technically, because most people watching felt the relief without understanding what was actually being confirmed. Temperature stabilizing at 92 degrees Celsius confirmed 3 things simultaneously. First, Alex's no coolant drive didn't destroy the water pump seals. That was the fear. Multiple water pumps, each one potentially compromised by running dry. If even one seal had failed, coolant would have mixed into the oil. The dipstick would have shown it. The temperature would have continued climbing past the fan activation point without dropping back. It dropped back. The seals held. Second, Bob's radiators work at operating temperature. Pressure testing at ambient temperature tells you the welds hold at room temperature. Thermal cycling under load tells you whether the aluminum expansion is being accommodated correctly. The temperature stabilized at 92 degrees, and holding there while the fans ran confirmed that all 10 radiators were transferring heat correctly. Honda Civic cores, Home Depot aluminum and tanks, Harbor Freight tools, holding a W16 engine at operating temperature. Third, the vacuum fill at 3 in the morning was complete enough. No airlocks, no hot spots from trapped air pockets causing local temperature spikes. The fill was performed without official documentation, without Bugatti's proprietary equipment, by 2 people at 3 in the morning after weeks of setbacks. It worked. 3 confirmations from 1 temperature reading. But here's what the temperature test did not confirm. And this is what Matt was thinking about when he said he was scared before getting in for the first drive. The temperature test didn't confirm Bob's crash bar. It confirmed the engine cooling system. It didn't confirm the gearbox mounting bracket under load. Bob welded that bracket. and improved on the factory design. He filled the casting voids and stamped his name on it. Matt said it was better than the factory, but a running engine at idle isn't the same as a running engine under acceleration. The gearbox mounting bracket carries the torque loads of a W16, producing 1,200 newton meters. At idle, those loads are minimal. During acceleration, they're significant. Matt knew this when he said, "The car was in half, and I'm now trying to pull it apart again by driving it." That line, said almost to himself while the car was moving, wasn't joking. He was aware that the first drive was the first real structural test of Bob's weld, that the forces going through that bracket during acceleration were exactly the forces the weld was designed to resist. Before I tell you what Matt found when he checked the bracket after the drive, let me tell you about the other thing being tested simultaneously. Something Bob built in 60 hours without a single measurement from an intact original. Something Matt said he couldn't believe was even possible. Bob's crash bar, the front crash bar. Every person Matt spoke to about rebuilding it said the same thing. Too hard. Cannot be done without scanning an intact original. We don't know how it's supposed to look. We can't replicate the geometry. We can't measure. Several Chiron owners offered to bring their cars to Miami so the bar could be scanned, but nobody would let Matt strip their car far enough to access the crash bar itself. The damaged original was, in Matt's words, absolutely mashed. Hard to tell what it was supposed to look like before the accident. Bob took the destroyed original back to his machine shop. 60 hours later, he sent a crash bar, same aluminum grade as the Bugatti original. Every mounting point in the correct position, every riv nut tapped, every thread cut, the curve, that specific curve of the horseshoe structure that defines the front geometry of the Chiron, replicated from a component that had been destroyed in a high-speed impact. Matt's reaction when he saw it wasn't scripted or managed. It was completely genuine. How have you done that? There's no way. Look at the curve. Literally the same. That is mad. That is mad. The bolt holes lined up on the first try. Now, here's why that's more significant than it might appear. The crash bar isn't just a structural component. It's the mounting point for the crash sensors. The sensors that tell the airbags to deploy in an impact. The sensors a car uses to determine which airbags fire and in what sequence. Bob rebuilt that bar from a destroyed original without measurements in 60 hours. The crash sensors are Porsche units that Matt referenced to fit them into the Chiron system mounted to it. Wired up, functional. One of the 2 airbag fault codes cleared after the crash bar was fitted and the sensors connected. Bob's work, done without documentation or precision equipment, produced a safety-critical component that the car's own diagnostic system accepted as correct. Then came the drive itself. Matt said he was nervous. It was a nerve-wracking moment. He connected the battery. 4 terminals, 2 positives, 2 negatives, under the carbon bodywork. Brought the car down from the lift. Got in. No windscreen. Fault code still on the dashboard. Alex on a different continent. Matt put in drive. His description, it literally sounds like we are in a jet. Then movement. The car rolled under its own power. All 4 wheels turned. The gearbox that cost 300,000 pounds to fix, according to Bugatti, worked. The bracket Bob welded holding. The cooling system maintains temperature. The custom Valvetronic exhaust produces a sound that even through a phone recording stops people mid-scroll. Then Matt pressed the accelerator properly. He said, "I can feel the blood coming out my feet. My body. Jesus, that is so fast." 1,600 horsepower in a car that was in 2 pieces 14 months ago, being driven for the first time by the person who rebuilt it. While he was driving, fault codes began clearing from the dashboard on their own. Traction control light off. Steering light off. The car recognized through the act of driving that the systems were functioning correctly. Some faults only clear under load. Under movement, the car had to be driven to confirm what diagnostic tools couldn't confirm at standstill. Matt already knew this, which is why, despite the remaining fault codes, he drove it. The car needed to move to tell him what was left to fix. Here's what the first drive actually confirmed. The bracket, checked after the drive. Bob's weld. Matt's words after inspecting it. Everything looks perfect. No movement. No cracking. no separation. 14 months ago, that bracket had a fracture through it that Bugatti said required their facility to address. Bob welded it in a Miami body shop with imported tools. It survived a Chiron accelerating hard enough to make the driver feel the blood draining from his extremities. The radiators. No drastic leaks after the drive. 10 Honda Civic cores. Custom aluminum tanks. Harbor Freight Weld survived their first real thermal cycle under load. The cooling system temperature held during the drive. No spikes. No anomalies. The gearbox shifted through every ratio smoothly. First time the gearbox had been used under real load since the crash. But here's the thing Matt found after the drive. The one issue he said wasn't good. The one thing he spotted and said he'd come back to later. A sensor wedged between the chassis sections when the car was put back together, twisted out of position. Trapped. To access it, the car might need to be partially split again. Not fully, not the complete chassis separation, but enough bolts loosened to create the gap needed to free the sensor and return it to its correct position. After everything the coolant test, the crash bar, the first drive, there's one more small chapter before this car is complete. And Matt's already planning how to solve it without splitting the car fully, because that's what this rebuild has always been. One problem, one solution. Forward, Matt Armstrong drove a Bugatti Chiron for the first time, the car that was in two pieces. The car Bugatti said couldn't be rebuilt outside their facility. The car the CEO made a video about. The car that had its VIN locked from every dealership on the planet. He drove it. The gearbox bracket Bob welded passed. The crash bar Bob built in 60 hours from a destroyed original passed. The Honda Civic radiators passed. The temperature test at 92 degrees Celsius passed. The gearbox under load passed. One sensor needs repositioning. The car might need a slight split. Then the fault code will clear. The BCM will reset. Paint. IVA number plate. And then Matt Armstrong drives a registered, road-legal Bugatti Chiron out of a workshop in Miami. Documented. Permanent. On YouTube, the sensor is the last mechanical obstacle. After that, every remaining step is administrative. The finish line is the